Long before Ric Flair strutted his way into wrestling immortality wearing diamond-studded robes, there was one man who wrote the blueprint. One man who took the brawling, mat-based world of pro wrestling and turned it into something glamorous, theatrical, arrogant, and dangerously seductive. That man was Nature Boy Buddy Rogers. Buddy wasn't just a trailblazer, he was a Category 5 hurricane of charisma in an industry still in its black and white infancy. With platinum blonde hair, a cocky grin, and an ego the size of the Empire State Building, Rogers didn't just wrestle, he performed. He strutted, he insulted crowds with a sneer. He made you pay to see him lose, and then he made you pay again when he didn't. While the casual fan might attribute the Nature Boy persona solely to Ric Flair, those who know their grappling history will always nod back to Rogers, the original robe-wearing, figure-4 leg-locking, microphone-blistering icon. And if you need further validation, Vince McMahon, the architect of modern sports entertainment, has gone on record more than once calling Buddy Rogers the greatest professional wrestler of all time. Not Hogan, not Austin, not even Flair. So what made Rogers that good? What made him tick? And more interestingly, who were the unlucky souls that couldn't stand him? Let's crack open the legend of the original Nature Boy. Born Herman Road Jr. in 1921 in Camden, New Jersey, Buddy Rogers came from working-class roots. But from a young age, he showed two things: raw athletic ability and an intense desire to be noticed. He got into wrestling in the late 1930s under his birth name, but quickly realized that a name like Herman Road didn't scream box office. So, with the help of promoter Jack Pfeiffer, who loved rebranding talent, he became Buddy Rogers. His early in-ring style was a mix of amateur grappling and powerful strikes. But Buddy saw something deeper. He realized that being technically sound wasn't enough. The audience didn't just want sport, they wanted spectacle. So he turned up the volume. By the 1950s, Rogers had cultivated his full-blown persona. The smug, robe-wearing heel who called himself the best, strutted like he owned the ring, and insulted the fans with poetic precision. He even pioneered the figure-4 leg lock, a move that would become his signature and eventually Flair's too. When television began to air wrestling to a wider audience, Buddy Rogers was the perfect face, or heel, for the medium. His larger-than-life personality leapt off the screen. He didn't just cut promos, he commanded them. He'd tell crowds, to a nicer guy it couldn't happen after cheating to win. He'd flex and say, "I'm the man of the hour, the man with the power, too sweet to be sour." Yes, before superstar Billy Graham, before The Rock, before MJF, there was Buddy Rogers. Vince McMahon was a teenager when Rogers was on top, and by all accounts he was hooked. What Rogers did inside and outside the ring helped form Vince's entire understanding of what a wrestling superstar should be. He was what every wrestler should aspire to be, Vince once told WWE magazine in 2004. He had the look, he had the voice, he had the psychology. Buddy Rogers made you feel something, and that's what this business is all about. Rogers was more than a wrestler. He was a prototype for the entire WWF model of the 1980s and beyond. Flair would follow his path. Hogan would amplify the flash. Shawn Michaels would mimic the cockiness. The Rock would take the promos to the stratosphere. But the mold was made by Rogers. Vince loved that Rogers could turn an audience without even bumping. He loved that Rogers didn't have to do 30-minute technical clinics. He just had to make people believe he could. To Vince, Rogers was the first man who truly understood wrestling as sports entertainment. In 1963, after a dispute with the National Wrestling Alliance, Vince McMahon Sr. split from the group and formed the Worldwide Wrestling Federation. Who did he make his first ever world champion? Buddy freaking Rogers. McMahon Sr. and Toots Mondt knew that to make their new promotion legitimate, they needed a proven draw. Buddy was that guy. He was crowned champion after winning a fictional tournament in Rio de Janeiro, sound familiar, and was officially the first ever WWWF champion. Though his reign was short, he lost to Bruno Sammartino in 48 seconds just weeks later due to health issues. Rogers' position as the founding father of WWE's title lineage remains untouched. To Vince Jr., this was wrestling royalty, his champion, his childhood hero, the very reason he saw wrestling not just as a sport, but as a vehicle for superhuman storytelling. Buddy Rogers wasn't exactly a backstage diplomat. In fact, for all his brilliance, Rogers was notoriously difficult to work with. He rubbed people the wrong way, played politics, and often took liberties in the ring. Here are 5 wrestlers who couldn't stand Buddy Rogers, and in some cases, the feeling was mutual. If Rogers was the peacock, Thesz was the pit bull. Lou Thesz was everything Rogers wasn't. A legitimate grappling machine who respected the mat and hated flamboyance. Their matches were legendary, but their backstage dynamic was pure venom. Thesz believed Rogers was all show and no substance. He resented the way Rogers politicized his way to the top and reportedly said, he had no real wrestling skills. He couldn't wrestle his way out of a paper bag if it didn't have a camera on it. Their 1963 NWA title match ended with Thesz legit shooting on Rogers to win the belt. It wasn't pretty, and it wasn't mutual respect. Bruno had respect for Rogers as a draw, but never liked the man behind the gimmick. When he defeated Rogers for the WWWF title in 1963 in a 48-second squash, it was because Rogers had suffered a mild heart attack weeks earlier and insisted he couldn't do a long match. But Bruno believed Rogers was stalling on dropping the belt and playing backstage games. Bruno, ever the professional, didn't appreciate the politics. He once said, he wanted to stay champion, but he wasn't fit. I think he wanted me to chase him around for months while he collected money. Kowalski was a wild man in the ring, but was known to be honest backstage. He despised Rogers' underhanded methods. He once said, Buddy Rogers was like a snake in silk boots. He'd smile at you in the locker room and then try to get you buried to the promoter. Kowalski was also furious that Rogers often no-sold his offense in tag matches, making it look like he wasn't hurting him. That kind of thing wasn't just unprofessional, it was dangerous. Antonino Rocca was a megastar in the 1950s, especially with New York's Latino fan base. Rogers hated sharing the spotlight, and the two men often clashed over top billing. Rocca felt Rogers was a prima donna, while Rogers saw Rocca as unworthy of his own fame. Promoters tried to keep them separate as much as possible. Rumors say Rogers once refused to main event unless Rocca was left off the card completely. Massive ego collisions. Flair owes his entire character to Rogers. But that didn't mean the two got along. Flair, in later interviews, claimed Rogers was bitter that Flair had taken the Nature Boy gimmick and arguably surpassed it. He couldn't stand that I made it bigger, Flair once said. He thought it was his forever, but I just took the torch and ran. They even wrestled once in the late 1970s for the Nature Boy name in a gimmick match. Flair won. Rogers, according to several sources, was never quite happy about that. After retiring in the late 1960s due to heart issues, Rogers would occasionally return as a manager or special referee. His sharp tongue was still there, and he even managed a young Ric Flair and later, Jimmy Snuka. In 1992, just before his death, Buddy was briefly brought into WCW as a special ambassador and potential manager, but time had taken its toll. He passed away shortly after from a massive stroke at age 71. Buddy Rogers might not be a household name in the TikTok era of wrestling, but to those who matter, to those who built this crazy business brick by brick, he's more than a legend. He's the original star. Vince McMahon didn't model WWE after Lou Thesz. He didn't build Hulkamania on the back of Jack Briscoe. He used Buddy Rogers as the foundation for everything WWE would become. Rogers was the first to be larger than life. The first to weaponize charisma, the first to cut promos that made you reach for your wallet. He was a heel you loved to hate, and in many ways, the grandfather of every sports entertainer to follow. To Vince, Buddy Rogers was wrestling's Elvis Presley, the king, the innovator, the one who made the genre shine. And despite the heat, the backstage drama, and the hatred from his peers, one thing is for sure, without Buddy Rogers, pro wrestling wouldn't be what it is today. Just ask Vince. Well, that's all we've got time for today, and a big thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of our future content. See you in the next video.